So I can't believe I spent so much on an Uber ride. This is crazy. Hello everyone and welcome to Monica's Travels. Today I want to share with you how much I actually spent in my longest and most expensive trip I've ever had. So, as some of you may already know, I am a budget traveler, but I'm not going to the extreme side. In my trip, I went to 9 Asian countries, which are Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and Vietnam. And I'm going to share with you how much I spent on flights, accommodations, food, transport, and extras. With extra, I mean like tours or souvenirs or things like that. So I will start with the most expensive one, and the main flight from this trip, which was from Romania to Thailand, it was $460. I know that there are way more cheaper flights for this route, but the problem here is that I wanted to get a round trip ticket for 3 months, so it's very hard to find offers for this kind of flights. I started at the beginning of July and ended at the end of September, so it was a very long period of time. Then the flights from Asia were actually very cheap at the beginning. Phuket Kuala Lumpur, $36. Kuala Lumpur Penang and Penang Singapore were each one of them were $15. You heard me right, just $15. It's just crazy. Singapore Bali was $80. I know that there might be cheaper flights for this too, but it's kind of hard, that I wasn't flexible with the timing. I work full time, so I had to be prepared for working, and I was flying in my free days. Bali Cebu in the Philippines was $133. That's a lot, but in my defense, it was a pretty long flight, so I think this is acceptable. Then from Cebu to Palawan, it was $40, back to cheap flights. Then back to expensive flights, Palawan Taipei in Taiwan, it was $103. In this area, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, everything starts to be more expensive. Flights, accommodations, food, everything, so it's acceptable, I guess. Taipei, Seoul, as I said, more expensive, $123. Seoul, Tokyo, it was $95. Tokyo, Osaka was $50. Then my biggest surprise from this trip was how cheap the flight from Japan to Vietnam was. So Osaka, Hanoi was just $115. So this is crazy cheap for an 8-hour flight. So it was with a low-cost airline, but still it was an 8-hour flight, and it was just a little bit over $100. So this is just crazy. Then Hanoi, Bangkok with $112. This was expensive, I think. Just from Vietnam to Thailand, they are pretty close. The flight wasn't that long, it was pretty short, but yeah, as I said, I've had some bad investments, let's say, because I was limited, I wasn't flexible, so yeah. Bangkok, Phuket was $34. I think this is very good, even if it's in the same country, it's very expensive, it's very cheap. Okay, so the total here was $1,411 on flights only. I know that this may seem very, very expensive. It seemed expensive to me at the beginning, but please be aware that I went all the way from Europe to Southeast Asia, and then I traveled to 9 countries, and not just one city in one country, but in lots of countries. I stayed in multiple cities like Thailand, like Malaysia, like Philippines, Japan, and I had flights within the countries too. So now let's start with accommodations. This is where the fun part starts, because you decide if you want to save lots of money or waste lots of money. I was somewhere in between, I think balanced more to the saving part, but it depends, you will see. I want you to keep in mind that all the numbers I say here should be split in two, because I stayed with my boyfriend and we always split everything equally. So for example, when I say 100, it's actually just $50 my part. Okay, so I will start with Phuket, where I stayed for 5 nights and I spent $150. So $30 per night for a 4-star hotel with infinity pool at the top, and it was in a great location, close to everything, close to the beach, the nightlife spot in Phuket, and so on. So this was, I think, my favorite accommodation from all of them. It was just amazing, great. And where we had the rooftop infinity pool, there was also a bar, so we could order drinks that were also very, very good and very cheap. So in Kuala Lumpur, we spent $106 for 3 nights. This was also a great accommodation in a very beautiful location with infinity pool. It was amazing. I loved it so much. From what I remember, it wasn't a hotel, it was an apartment on Airbnb, but it was still amazing. I prefer using Airbnb to save money. Still in Malaysia, in Penang, we spent $140 for 3 nights. This was, again, an apartment with infinity pool. We spent lots of time in the pools. I mean, I think it was a very good investment in this, because we had lots of fun, we relaxed a lot. We used to stay almost every day in the evening at the pool, or in the morning, I don't know, it depends. Singapore, where I spent $165 for 3 nights. I think it's acceptable. I stayed in a private room in a decent location. I know that Singapore is very expensive, so I didn't want to spend more than that for an entire apartment, for example. Next is Bali, which I split in 3 accommodations, because I know that in Ubud there are lots of beautiful accommodations, so I wanted to try new things. So I stayed in 3 places in Ubud. For 7 nights I spent $232. For 4 nights I spent $167, and for 8 nights I spent $245. It seems expensive, but I stayed there for 3 weeks. This is also split by 2, so I think it was pretty cheap. I stayed in private houses. It was a small house with your own private room. I mean, the house was just a private room and private bathroom, but they were very beautiful, and you had an entire pool for yourself. And it was in the middle of the jungle, so I think it was an absolutely great experience. Then we go to the Philippines, which was crazy cheap. So in Bohol I spent $215 for 5 nights, but we had the full house for ourselves, so it was a huge house. And if you're wondering why did we get such a big house, it's because Bohol isn't that touristic though, so there weren't that many accommodations. We also wanted to stay on Panglao Island, and it was pretty hard to find something else. In Cebu, we had an apartment for ourselves, and it was an infinity pool on the rooftop, so it was very beautiful. It was right in the middle of the city, so everything was perfect. $225 for 5 nights. El Nido was 170 for 7 nights. I think this is the most affordable in Taiwan. In Taipei, we stayed at a hotel which was 172 for 4 nights. It wasn't that bad, but the internet was so slow. I couldn't even work. I think one day we went to McDonald's to and we ate something there just to use the internet and be able to work. Then in Seoul we spent $229 for 5 nights. The bad part here was that we had the accommodation on a hill and there was no transportation over there, so every time we wanted to visit something we had to climb like 40 or 50 minutes. But the good part was that we had a very beautiful view of the city because it was up in the hill. In Tokyo we spent 309 for 5 nights. This was pretty expensive because we also stayed in a hostel. We had a private room, but it was pretty central. We used to just walk to visit like everything in Tokyo almost. Kyoto, we spent $393 for 7 nights. Again, Japan is expensive, but it was pretty nice. We had a private room, private bathroom with like specific beds for them. It's a great experience. I like to experience new things, so I appreciated this accommodation even if it was kind of expensive. Then Osaka was $175 for 3 nights. Osaka was so nice as a city. Then in Vietnam we spent $153 for 4 nights. This was central and the entire apartment for ourselves. I loved it. It was very cheap, very beautiful. Then in Bangkok we spent $145 for 4 nights. So I love Bangkok. The accommodations are so nice. I went there twice, and each time I had an accommodation with a great view of the city and with pool and with everything you need. The room was nice and private. Then in Phuket for 1 night we spent $50. I don't know why we spent so much on just 1 night. I think it was because it was close to the airport. I remember that it had a pool and I don't know what was in my mind. I mean, why would I get an accommodation with a big pool just for 1 night? Maybe I thought that I would be very tired at the end of the trip, so I just wanted to relax at the pool. But honestly, all I wanted to do was just sleep and sleep and sleep. So the total was a lot. It was 3,441. But please don't forget that this is split by 2, so my part is 1,720. For 3 months of accommodation around 9 countries, and some of them were at hotels and with pools and so on, I think it's very acceptable. I mean, here my rent is $300 per month, so in 3 months it's $900. I mean, $900 versus 1,700, it's like less than double. It could have been better, obviously. I think that if I was very extreme and very cheap, I could have reduced it to, let's say, $1,000, but I don't regret anything, honestly. Okay, so let's go on with food, transportation and extra. I will do it country by country. So let's start with Thailand. In Phuket, I spent $100 on food, $57 on transport and $160 on extra in 5 days. You might be wondering why I spent so much on extra. In Phuket, I wanted to visit the entire island and see the James Bond Island. So I booked a tour, and it wasn't that cheap. I think it was around $70 or $80, but it was totally worth it. We had food included. It was a full day from morning to the evening, and usually tours are very, very good, very beautiful, and totally worth it. Then I spent money on souvenirs, on maybe some dresses that were very cheap. I mean, I remember that I spent like $10 on a dress. In Bangkok, we spent $90 on food, $20 on transport, and $15 on extra. It was at the end of the trip. We were very tired. We didn't want to do anything. So yeah, $15 on extra. We didn't do anything basically. In Kuala Lumpur, we spent $35 on food, $27 on transport, and $9 on extra. In Kuala Lumpur, the food was cheap, the transportation was cheap, everything was cheap. It was amazing. In Penang, we spent $40 on food, $21 on transportation, and $15 on extra. I think extra is I don't know, entrances, because we went to a hill somewhere and we saw the entire city. It was very, very beautiful. We had many activities there. I loved it. Then Singapore. On food we spent $35. I spent. Transportation $7 and extra 12. I was very cheap in Singapore, honestly. We ate in Chinatown and Indiatown, where it was cheaper than in other parts of Singapore, and the food was also great. I loved it. Then in Indonesia, in Bali, 19 days, 180 on food, transportation 66, and extra 200. So 200 because we went on a tour to Nusa Penida, and we also bought souvenirs and clothes, and I don't know, we spent pretty much on souvenirs because I loved how many things Bali had in terms of souvenirs. $180 was so cheap for the food. It's less than $10 per day, and I remember that I ate a lot, like 3 times a day, and with cocktails or smoothies or things like that. It is crazy cheap. Then in the Philippines, I remember that here I spent pretty much on food. In Bohol for 5 days, food 80, transportation 5, extra 20. So transportation 5. We had a scooter rented for 2 or 3 days, and we just paid $10 to ride a scooter for 3 days. $10. I can't believe that. It's crazy cheap. And I don't know why I spent $80 on food. I can't remember. I think we ate one night at an expensive restaurant. I don't usually do that, but I don't know. I think it had very good reviews. Then in Cebu, it was $60 food, 10 transportation, and 9 extra. I think it was because of Uber from the airport accommodations airport, and I didn't spend anything on transportation because everything was closed. I was walking. I remember that one day I just walked all day. Food again, expensive. I remember that I ordered lots of food. I don't know why I wouldn't cook anything. I just went to the restaurant or just order food at home. I don't know. I was spending money like that. In El Nido, we spent $93 on food, 15 on transportation, and 17 on extra. It was 7 days. The food was a bit more expensive in El Nido than in the other places in the Philippines, but I heard that El Nido is pretty expensive. Taiwan, $83 on food, $10 transportation, 30 on extra. For 4 days. Okay, so I spent $30 on extra because we went to very beautiful place. It was up on a hill and we could see the entire city from there. We stayed for sunset and we've heard lots of stories about that place. It was explained very well there, and I think it was a great experience. And if you travel to Taipei, I totally recommend it. So South Korea, 60 on food, 26 transportation, and 23 on extra. On food we spent a lot because I think South Korea is pretty expensive in terms of food, or at least this is what it seemed to me. And I think it's a very beautiful country, a lovely country. I was a bit confused that they don't have Google Maps. I mean, Google Maps didn't work there. In Japan, Tokyo, 5 days, 90 food, transportation 120, and extra 20. Okay, so we arrived late at the airport and no more trains were working and no more buses were working, so we couldn't get to the accommodation. There were two choices: one, to spend the night in the airport; two, to pick Uber. But Uber was actually crazy expensive. I don't know why Uber is so expensive in Japan. We would have just choose the airport choice, but I had to work the next day from like 8 a.m. I think, and I could just sleep in the airport and then be able to work for 8 hours the next day. It was just crazy. It was too much for me. I was already crazy tired from the flight, from the entire trip. I needed to rest. So we decided that we should take Uber because I will earn that money in the next day anyways. So it was not like wasted money. Okay, so this Uber ride was actually $130 or something around there. Okay, I just can't believe I spent so much on an Uber ride. I mean, for me it may seem crazy expensive. For some other people it may seem very cheap. I don't know, but personally for me it is very expensive. Especially that it was around 14 minutes of riding, so I don't know, it was short, expensive, and I don't think it was worth it, but we had no other choice, so yeah. Then in Kyoto we spent 76 on food, 40 on transportation, and 9 on extra. In Osaka we spent $40 on food, 26 on transportation, and 2 on extra. So here I didn't buy any tour or anything, so I didn't actually spend almost anything at all on extras. I didn't buy that many souvenirs or things like that. In Vietnam I stayed 4 days and we spent $30 on food, very cheap, $60 on transportation, 16, and 53 on extras. So we spent so much on extras because we bought a tour to Halong Bay. It was amazing. It was very beautiful. The food was included. It was a full day tour, so totally worth it. So the total was 2,152 plus 1,720 plus 1,411, and this is actually $5,283. Just my side for 3 months around 9 Asian countries with multiple cities, with multiple activities, great accommodations. Everything was fine. It was an amazing, unforgettable, incredible trip, and I would do it again even if this was the cost. To me, it doesn't seem that expensive. It would mean less than $2,000 per month in just full-time travel. The flights could be avoided if you choose to stay in one place only. And also you could get discounts if you stay for more than 1 month in the same place. You can rent a place for like 2 months or 3 months, and it will be very cheap. So I spent so much because I was just moving around all the time, and the flights were pretty expensive sometimes. The accommodation had no discount, and it was pretty expensive just moving around all the time. Um, yeah, when you say 5,000, it seems a lot because you spend 5,000 just on travel. But think another way, that on food, for example, you would still spend the same money at home that you spent while traveling. So it's almost the same thing. On accommodation, I would have spent almost $1,000 even if I stayed home, and so on. So it's not that expensive. I also have another video on how to travel on a budget, tips, and my best tricks and tips. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, just make sure you smash that like button and subscribe button and comment, and I'm waiting for your suggestions for new videos for the future. And you can find me on Instagram on Monica's Travels. I post there pretty much daily. You can see my blog at betravelos.com. I try to post at least once a month, but I'm like crazy with work and university, and I cannot guarantee that always. So thank you again for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye bye!